Oh,
Hello.
there.
Hey, Mayor.
Andy, Ajit, how are you doing?
Good.
You look very learned with all those books behind you.
It's a Photoshop.
And Sandy, what are you in, like Abe Lincoln's cabin?
Somebody suggested it was the wall of torture. It's actually instruments used to build pioneer log houses in upper Ottawa Valley in the 1840s.
Well, there you go. I learned something new.
Well, I don't know if we go that far, but
So Suzanne? She's no longer on the board, eh?
that's right. Her appointment expired on the 18th.
Is there any indication of when she's a provincial appointee, right?
That is correct.
Any indication when there might be an appointment coming?
We understand, or I understand from conversations, that they have been interviewing people, but no decision has been made, it would appear. Okay, the agenda is on the screen, so I'd like to welcome everybody and call the meeting to order for May 25th, 2020. Just a heads up, because we're broadcasting on Zoom and live streaming on YouTube, we're at the mercy of individuals' service, internet service. So there is a possibility of technical difficulties. Should we receive any disruption, if people just remain patient, and we'll work to fix the issue and get back up online as quickly as possible. I'd also at this time just like to take an opportunity to give a big vote of thanks to Member Valley whose appointment ended on May 18th. Suzanne was a passionate proponent of all things policing, and we're certainly going to miss her enthusiasm and her passion for issues, and we certainly wish her well and thank her so much for all of her years of service to the police board. In terms of going forward, when I present an item, I'll ask the board members if the item is carried. I'll then follow up and confirm to see if there are any dissents. For the presentation, I would ask everyone to be muted other than the speaker. And if you're joining without video, please say your name before speaking. If you are joining the meeting from a location with background noise, once again, please keep yourself muted until it is time to speak. Following the public meeting, we will have our in-camera meeting by teleconference. I will now proceed with the agenda. With the board's consent, I would like to reorder items 1 and 2. So we will hear from Crime Stoppers first, and then the chief's verbal. That the Ottawa Police Services Board confirm the agenda of 25th of May 2020 meeting as altered. Is the agenda confirmed?
Confirmed.
Any dissents? Okay, the next item is the confirmation of minutes. That the Ottawa Police Services Board confirm minutes number 21 of the 27th of April 2020 meeting. Are the minutes confirmed?
Confirmed.
Any dissents? Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Hearing none, I'll go on to the committee meetings, reports from committee chairs and minutes. We had 2 committee meetings since our last board meeting. Member Norman, can you please provide a brief update on the last Policy and Governance Committee meeting from the 11th of May?
Thank you, Chair. The Policy and Governance Committee met on May the 11th, 2020. We discussed the next strategic planning cycle for the board and different options to explore in terms of timing. Given the ongoing pandemic and the uncertainty around the impacts, we endorsed the recommendation from the OPS to extend and adjust the current plan as opposed to commencing a new planning cycle now. It was acknowledged that this could be revisited as more information and certainty is known regarding stabilization and recovery. Meanwhile, joint planning is recommended to proceed under option A. A report is before the board this evening for a decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Member Norman. As chair of the FAC, I'll provide the next update. The FAC Committee, Finance and Audit Committee met on the 12th of May. We discussed the ongoing financial impact of the pandemic on the OPS budget. These discussions will be ongoing. There is a quarterly financial update on this evening's agenda, and the FAC Committee will be meeting again the first week of January. We'll be meeting before then. That the Ottawa Police Services Board receive these two reports for information. Are these items received?
Received.
Any dissents? Hearing none. Inquiries. Are there any inquiries? Hearing none, I'll move on to the first item, which is the Chief's verbal report, which will actually be the second item, and we'll hold this item. The second item is the National Capital Area Crime Stopper semi-annual update, which we will hold as there is a presentation. The third item on the agenda is the organizational priorities and changes. We will hold this item as there is a presentation. The fourth item is board committee appointments. That the Ottawa Police Services Board approve the appointment of Councillor Meehan to the Policy and Governance Committee and the Human Resources Committee, and Member Nerman to the Thomas G. Flanagan Scholarship Award Selection Committee. Is this item carried?
Carried.
Thank you. Are there any dissents?
No.
Thank you. Developing the 21 to 23 strategic plan. I just wanted to make a comment that this is really important for the board. This is one of our key responsibilities, and it's a mechanism that we have for setting strategic direction of the OPS and the chief. It is how the board translates the community's expectations into the priorities for the OPS. The Ottawa Police Services Board approve option A, extend, adjust the existing plan as endorsed by the Policy and Governance Committee. Is this item carried?
Carried.
Any dissents? Item number 6, appointment of special constables, Ottawa Police Service. That the Ottawa Police Service Board approve the reappointments of Ottawa Police Service employees listed in document 1 as special constables pursuant to section 53 of the Police Services Act in accordance with the terms and conditions set forth in the attached approval of appointment form. Is this item carried?
Carried.
Any dissent? Item number 7 is the South Project Phase A update and increase to prime consultant contract. I have a question about this, so I will hold it. Maybe some other board members have questions, but in any event, we'll hold that one. Number 8, Workforce Management Report, first quarter 2020. That the Ottawa Police Services received this report for information. Is this item received?
Received.
Received.
Any dissents? Item number 9, Human Rights and Racial Profiling Policy Annual Report. That the Ottawa Police Services Board received this report for information. Is this item received?
Received.
Any dissents? Thank you. Equitable Work Environment Annual Report. That the Ottawa Police Services Board received this report for information. Is this item received?
Received.
Any dissents? Financial Status Report, first quarter 2020. That the Ottawa Police Service Board received this report for information. Is this item received?
Received.
Any dissents? Number 12, Performance Report, first quarter 2020. That the Ottawa Police Services Board received this report for information. Is this item received?
Received.
Any dissents? Number 13, Legal Services Status Report, 2020 first quarter. That the Ottawa Police Service Board received this report for information. Is this item received?
Received.
Any dissents? Number 14, Outstanding Board Inquiries and Motions, May 2020. That the Ottawa Police Services Board received this report for information. Is this item received?
Received.
Any dissents? Letters of commendation. That the Ottawa Police Services Board received this report for information. Is this item received?
Received.
Any dissents? Okay, we're now going to go back to what will be item 1, which will be the National Capital Area Crime Stopper semi-annual update. And I believe we have a presentation from Mr. McMullen, who is the president of the National Capital Area Crime Stoppers. So I'll turn it over to Mr. McMullen. Oh, sorry, I see Robert Sueda had his hand up. So before we have that presentation, I'm sorry, Robert, did you have a question? I'm guessing not. I see a hand up. Robert,
He sent me a message that I cannot, I'm not able to use my audio. That is his concern.
Oh,
So maybe if you can tell him to text you, or Krista if he
Okay.
has a question.
Okay, I will do that.
And if he wants to put his hand down, then because I can keep an eye there in case he puts it up again, then I'll stop it. That's good. Okay, so now do we have Mr. McMullen on to allow us to give us a presentation?
Yes, can you hear me,
Great.
Chair?
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect. Well, thanks. Obviously, this is a different format for our semi-annual presentation, but nonetheless, we're pleased to be here and share with you some of the successes and challenges we've had. Obviously, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic has not escaped us like every other sector of our society. We have had an ability to pivot and adjust to this new normal, and I'm pleased to say that we're doing fairly well, all things being considered. So this is our 35th anniversary, not exactly how we celebrating in our community, but this program is built on community engagement and trust. And like many, we've had to reimagine some of our community engagement over the last several months. And some of those things include having our police coordinator, Constable Getz, redeployed to the front line to help the police service. We've seen a slight decline in some of our tip volume, especially in mid-March, but those tip volumes seem to return in April, and we expect that's going to be the case for the balance of May. We did receive several, fewer than 100 COVID-19 related tips, some specifically for the city bylaw services and some related to the Quarantine Act that went to our policing partners. All in all, less impactful than we would have expected. Our last public event was actually held on March the 10th. It was an Ottawa Housing Community Safety Awareness evening on Cooper Street with some of our partners, including the community police officer. We conducted the meeting with strict sort of social distancing even before the health guidelines, and we chose to move our own board meetings into a sort of a conference call format then as well, and we took the stance to suspend all of our community engagement and in-person meetings, and obviously that was a pretty substantial step for us. I'm happy to say we've done several now conference call and a few online meetings, and it's been quite productive. Maybe for a second, I'll go back to last fall when our last sort of presentation was. Since that time, we hosted our annual general meeting. I'm happy to say our executive team was re-elected for another 3 years of term. We appointed our auditors and other functions at that AGM. And we continued to engage with the public through a variety of different events through the fall, including all the Help Santa Toy Parade, the Barhaven Santa Parade, and the Orleans Parade of Lights. Obviously, our Grinch continues to be a crowd favorite, and participating at these types of events is good for our program in terms of engagement with the community, but it's also an opportunity for youth volunteers to get out and directly connect with the community that we serve. So it was a fun time. January marked our Crime Stoppers Month that we celebrate with other programs right across the country. We were able to take part in a variety of community events at Carlinwood Shopping Center, the Russell Food Mart, Billings Bridge Shopping Center, Sobeys on Innes Road, some Ottawa community housing facilities, various community safety meetings. Our coordinator, Constable Getz, joined Deputy Chief Bell on CFRA with Dahlia Kurtz at the end of January, and shared information and helped us raise awareness about our program. And then Constable Getz and I were back with Dahlia Kurtz in February to talk about our youth program and some of our engagement. You know, one of the things that is a challenge for us in terms of connecting with the community is that we don't ever share our own success stories. We do share our statistics, and I'm quite pleased with our 2019 results. The tip volume was down slightly. We received just under 4,000 anonymous tips from the public in 2019, but all of the metrics that we use to identify our successes increased. So we had an increase to 62 arrests, 36 criminal charges, 36 criminal cases cleared, 298 criminal charges, some $86,000 in recovered property, almost $250,000 in seized narcotics, 16 recovered arms, and that was a large number, and resulting in just under $17,000 in cash rewards being approved. That had a significant impact in 2019, and we're really pleased by that. And as I mentioned, although we saw a slight decline in March, the anonymous tips continue to come in. We're continuing to work with our law enforcement partners and make a contribution to community safety. So that's been a positive. On the COVID-19, we've had to make a few adjustments. Typically in early June, we'd be attending a provincial training conference. That's been postponed. We've adjusted some of our other events, as I mentioned earlier. One of our challenges moving forward is the fundraising element, and golf is a major fundraising event. We host a golf tournament every year that is basically our major fundraiser, and that's potentially going to be in jeopardy. So we're a little concerned about how that looks for us. We have done a few other community type events that we've tested out. We're going to launch in early June a Love Your Local Trivia online event, and hope to connect with our audience, and hopefully they'll enjoy a half hour of online trivia from Crime Stoppers about local Ottawa milestones and events, and hopefully they'll learn more about us and hopefully want to make a donation as well. The other elements, obviously, for us is moving forward. We're looking forward to having some engagement with the community when the time is appropriate for that, and we're confident in the meantime, both social media with the traditional media partners, continuing to reinforce the public's contribution in terms of providing information either directly to law enforcement or anonymously through Crime Stoppers, nets and yields results, not only in community safety, but financially for our police partners and the city as well. Be happy to take any questions or discuss anything with
Thank you very much, Mr. McMullen. That was you've had a very busy year, obviously. I'll turn it over to our board members now and open it up for some questions. Any questions from any board members?
Maybe if I could just offer not a question, but a thanks and congratulations to Crime Stoppers. The work you do is, as you've proven by your statistics and the arrests and tips and so on, is very, very valuable information. And you do it on a shoestring budget. So congratulations and thank you for the presentation.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Are there any other comments or questions from any other board members?
Yes, Chair. I have a brief comment, not a question. Thank you for the nice presentation. And as the Mayor has rightly said, you are doing on a shoestring budget. I'm just curious to know I will say go just 2 months back, prior to the COVID-19 and post-COVID, you have seen the spike in the cases or in the tips or the cases, or it has gone down?
So we did receive fewer tips post mid-March, but that quickly stabilized and returned. I don't think that crime has taken a break during the pandemic, and we've seen the need for programs like Crime Stoppers to help in that regard. So we haven't seen a dramatic a decrease in tips.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Nerman. Are there, Carol Ann Meehan, Member Meehan, you have a question?
Thank you, Sen.
Carol Ann?
Can you hear? Okay, now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Thank you, Mr. McMullen. I will echo the praise of my colleagues. You do a fantastic job. I just wanted to just go over those numbers. So you said in 2019, just about 4,000 anonymous tips, leading to 62 arrests, 63 crime cases solved. Is that correct?
36 criminal cases cleared.
Cleared. 298 criminal charges laid.
Yes.
$86,000 in recovered property.
Correct.
And there was one other stat that you had in there.
So just under $250,000, about 242,000 in illegal narcotics that were seized as a result of the anonymous tip.
And were there guns too?
16 recovered arms in 2019.
And how does that compare to other years?
So all of those areas has gone up. The tip volume over the last 7 or 8 years, the tip volume has been steadily increasing to a little over 4,000 over the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
So 2019, we actually saw a slight decrease in the actual numbers, but the arrests were almost double, criminal cases cleared, and criminal charges significantly up. Recovered property was a little bit down in 2019. Narcotics was up, and the recovered arms, 16 is the highest that I can recall in the last 8 years being recovered.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, again, it's the public's trust in coming forward to a program like Crime Stoppers that basically guarantees the anonymity, takes away the fear of reprisal,
Mm-hmm.
Removes the need for somebody to come forward and testify in court, and that information they share clearly has value to us as a society, and especially when I look at the financial implications, look at cost, time, and money to investigate and clear cases, and so having this program. And we do operate on a shoestring, to be able to offer that to the citizens is worthwhile.
So the $17,000 that you paid out in rewards, that's all money that is that's collected over and donated over the year. So are you anticipating that more trouble in coming up with those funds because of COVID this year? And is there anything that you think that we can do as a board to help you out? I don't typically put Crime Stoppers in my community newsletter, but I definitely can do that for you.
Sure. So, we're optimistic that we're going to be able to have some continued fundraising.
Yeah.
Obviously, we rely on, the business community and donations. And look, they're in challenging times like we all are. So, anything that you can do to help share that. Events like this are helpful for us to raise awareness. Most people don't realize that we don't have direct taxpayer funding. And so, just sharing that information, sharing the good work that we do, I think is vital to our success. I wish we could articulate and speak to some of the specific incidents and cases that we're able to do, because that has an impact. So, anything you can do, if you know someone that's has a business opportunity and is able to make a donation to us, we would gladly accept that. We're not for profit, so we can offer tax receipts and such, but we're definitely going to be challenged, and we are concerned. We don't have a large cash reserve, and we can absolutely need those money. We've got expenses like everyone else, whether it's the insurance and phone line costs and paying for the call center that answers our tip line 24/7. All those things.
Yeah, I'll be happy to help you in any way possible. So I will get on that right this week.
I appreciate
Thanks, Mr. McMillan. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions for Mr. McMullen? I'm not seeing any. So that the Ottawa Police Services Board received this report for information. Is it received? Thank you very much. We'll now go on to the first item of business, which is the Chief's verbal report. Chief, can I turn it over to you now?
Merci beaucoup, Chair. Thank you very much. First of all, I'd also like to join you in recognizing the work and contributions of Member Suzanne Valaquette. Wish her every success in her new endeavors, but I'm also grateful for her leadership. She brought a lot of great insights, important contributions, and she facilitated some very important discussions in my early tenure with the Ottawa Police Service. So I wish her every success, and I thank you again. So this is a little bit of a different format today, and I'm grateful again, Chair, you and Krista and the team for allowing a little bit of variation to get us through an important series of presentations. We have a lot to discuss today, but before we get started, I wanted to take a moment to thank the members of the Ottawa Police Service for their continued dedication and hard work, as well as our community partners who help us to deliver core policing in this city. We continue to work with and in support of the Ottawa Public Health during this COVID crisis. And I want to again recognize the outstanding leadership of Dr. Vera Etches. We're moving into what we are calling the stabilization phase of the COVID-19 pandemic, as alluded to earlier on by Member Nerman. Our stabilization plan will be focused on people, service, and finances. The health and safety of our residents and our members remain the top priority for us during this pandemic plan. We're also working diligently on managing the financial impact of COVID-19, and I've been doing so with yourself, as well as city staff and council. We continue to work with all of our partners to manage this ongoing pandemic, including city bylaw, paramedics, fire, the healthcare community, as well as trying to navigate our way through the various emergency measures that have been imposed at the local, provincial, and national levels. We want to thank everyone for their ongoing contributions to keeping our city safe and healthy. The following is an overview of the crime, traffic, and social disorder trends that we've seen since the official declaration of COVID-19, along with some examples of our operational responses over the last month since my previous report. We continue to see increases in mental health, as well as family and neighbor-related disputes. The good weather, the relaxation of emergency measures, and the reopening of the economy are all creating new opportunities, as well as new public health challenges, as well as increasing calls for service. This adds new complexities for our members on virtually every call. We've worked with our partners at Activa, Crime Prevention Ottawa, Interval House, and the Eastern Resource Center, who helped us develop Unsafe at Home program, a secure text and online chat service that gives women living with domestic violence and abuse the support they need during the COVID-19 pandemic. This program's launch has resulted in a very successful level of engagement. We've had over 4,800 visits to the website, and more than 300 people have reached out for support during the first month of operations for the chat program. This is double the expected volume. We continue to focus first and most on community engagement and education, and we used enforcement last and least. To date, the Ottawa Police Service has issued 5 tickets and 4 warnings under the Emergency Services Act relating to the pandemic. Our traffic services team recently launched Operation Overwatch to address speeding and dangerous driving across the city. I would suggest dangerous driving, speeding, and stunt driving is probably the #1 public complaint that we have received to date during the COVID-19 pandemic. To date, our traffic services team and our OPS frontline officers have issued 823 tickets. This includes 36 vehicles that were impounded when the drivers were charged with stunt driving. Last month, we initiated a campaign for the Asian community who were being impacted by COVID-related hate incidents. The service worked with the community to create posters in multiple languages to help those impacted to get the help they need. To be clear, while this has affected directly our Asian community members, it affects everybody in the city. Nobody and no community should experience this type of behavior in our city. Commercial break-and enters have increased across the city, and with the community support, we've been able to identify and arrest a large percentage of those committing the crimes. We continue to provide crime prevention through environmental design resources to the business community, and we're working with social services and the not-for-profit sector to prevent people from falling between the cracks and into criminal activities. Our Marine unit officers are out ensuring that boaters are adhering to the safety regulations. Over the past several weekends, they stopped more than 120 boats and issued 57 tickets. Sorry, that was over the Victoria Day weekend. Over the past weekend, we stopped 106, with one impaired charge being laid. Our officers were checking for the necessary safety equipment on board, as well as the good conduct of the drivers. Our investigative units and frontline officers continue to conduct street-level investigations, as well as search warrants. This has resulted in multiple arrests, along with the seizures of proceeds of crime, a variety of drugs, including cocaine, fentanyl, hydromorphone, along with a number of crime guns. To date, the Ottawa Police Service has seized 45 crime guns. That's in 2020 alone. Ottawa has seen a total of 11 shootings so far in this city in 2020, compared to this time last year in 2019 when there were 26 shootings. Moving from the crime traffic disorder trends, a very important aspect is how we support our members with health and wellness to allow them to operate safely and effectively in their service delivery. One of the most critical board and service priorities is the health and wellness of all of our OPS members. I'm very pleased to announce that the Ottawa Police Service has partnered with the Ottawa Police Association, along with the Senior Officers Association, to develop and implement a fatigue management strategy. This strategy is an overarching evidence-based approach to facilitate member recovery, improve member health and performance, and improve individual health and safety of our members. The impacts of this strategy will also positively affect service delivery and public confidence in policing. The command, senior leadership, and myself, we have all already taken the training. This was a 4-hour session that we took earlier this month. The training was excellent. I've learned a lot myself, and I will tell you, since I've taken the training, I've gotten a little bit more sleep and actually feel a little bit healthier myself. Training will be rolled out across the organization over the coming months. I'd like to take this time to recognize Ottawa Police Association President Matt Scott for his leadership role in developing this strategy and pulling together the stakeholders. The OPS and I are looking forward to working closely with both the OPA and the Senior Officers Association on this important initiative. Next, I'd like to update the board and the public on our neighborhood policing strategy. In May, we saw the rollout of our latest neighborhood resource team. This was in the Byward Market and Lower Town area. Despite the challenges of COVID-19, we remain fully committed to advancing the board's priority to increase neighborhood policing and the services priority to double the number of deployed neighborhood resource teams in the city, from 3 that were deployed in 2019 to additional 3 in 2020, bringing the total to 6. The next 2 teams to be deployed will be in Centertown and Bayshore, and these deployments will take place in the fall. I want to touch on some community feedback. This will be a sample of the feedback that the Ottawa Police Service members received since the last board meeting. The first one I'll draw attention to, and this is a quote: "I'm writing to you in advance of the 14th anniversary of the suicide of my 18-year-old daughter. I should have written you a long time ago, but I want to tell you that I will never forget how the members of your service handled the situation that day. They were all very professional, but more importantly, they were sensitive and kind to me as I screamed and cried while they and other emergency service personnel worked to try to save my daughter's life. Other people were present, the coroner, firefighters, and paramedics, but it is the police officers that I remember. I will always be grateful for what those officers did that day, and if it is possible, after all this time, I ask that you pass on my thanks to them." The second comment, I was moving my belongings from my old home following an abusive relationship. 2 officers were present during this time and exhibited professionalism, situational awareness, dispute management expertise, sensitivity, and objectivity. They made me feel protected during this ordeal. Officers like these are a benefit to Ottawa. Chair and board, there are many more examples to be found in item number 15 of this agenda, and many, many more that could have been included in this report, but for the time restraints. I'm very proud to be the chief of an organization composed of such professional, dedicated, and compassionate members. Deeds speak, and this is the benchmark of service that we all strive for. I'd like now to take a moment to congratulate Isabel Granger on her promotion to the rank of superintendent and her recent assignment in the role of leading the newly created Respect, Values, and Inclusion Directorate. You'll hear much more about the RVI Directorate very shortly. I'd also like to congratulate Troy Froats for his promotion to the rank of sergeant. Troy is a long-serving member of the Ottawa Police Service, has the respect of the frontline officers, has a history of policing in his family, and is going through a very difficult personal time. This promotion meant a lot to him and his family and to the service as a whole. This concludes my verbal report. I know we're going to be moving right away from this report to the presentation on the organizational changes and how we're implementing the board's priorities. At this point, I'll hand it back to you, Chair, and take any questions you may have before we go to the actual presentation.
Thank you very much, Chief. I really appreciate your report and the thoroughness of it. And I think we all share the challenging times that you and your team have been leading us through. So I really want to, on behalf of the board, thank you and your team. And now I'll turn it over to Mayor. I think you have a question.
I do. Just really more of a statement and observation, Chief. Thank you for the report, as thorough as always. Unbelievable that over 800 tickets have been issued for stunt drivers, or as I call them, stupid drivers. And I'm glad that you're continuing that push, because that's certainly from my colleagues here at City Hall. The biggest complaint we often receive is about speeding. And with fewer cars on the road and the roads opening up, these stunt or stupid drivers are taking advantage of that. So I would encourage you to continue to put resources into the stunt driving and excessive speed in not just traditional long stretches of road, but also in residential streets, because that's where we see a lot of the speeding. They're not respecting the 40 or the 50-kilometer sign. So I commend you and your officers for doing that. And I've seen, there's some great Twitter accounts from some of your officers, how they're catching people going 160, 170 kilometers an hour. And they're not only being stupid by putting themselves at risk, but more importantly, they're putting people around them who they don't even know. Some person driving a car, walking across the street, in great danger when they're at that speed, because they just can't stop, obviously, to prevent them from hitting someone or killing someone. So thank you and your officers for the work you've done on stunt driving.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Member Mann, you have a question?
Yes, Chair. Thank you, Sandy. Chief, great report. I've got two issues. Can you give us an update on the number of Ottawa police officers who have had COVID? I guess that's the question. What is the situation?
Again, I want to thank Mayor in response to your traffic questions, Inspector Michelle Morin and Staff Sergeant Marc-Andre Sheehy for their leadership in this area. Member Meehan, we have to date 3 cases where members have contracted the virus. 2 of them related to work-related issues, 1 related to community contact. That is a very low number. While we're not prepared or able to provide benchmark information in regards to other police services, I can tell you that we anticipated much higher levels of contraction by our members and a much lower ability to turn out a work-ready service. But the police service took very definitive early action. We focused extremely hard on member health and wellness. We made very early investments in personal protection equipment, although none of it was perfect. The effort has had the desired effect with a very low number of members directly impacted. That said, those members who were impacted had a difficult time. They received top-level support from the organization, and we passed on the support that the board provided as well.
Was anybody hospitalized, or were they able to deal with it at home?
I have to be careful about too much health-related information.
Just,
One member did require significant medical supports, including hospitalization.
okay. And I hope that everyone's doing well now. Okay. The other question I had has to do with a follow-up with the mayor's question on speeding. I live in the southern end of the city, and it seems like when we hit 10 o'clock at night, it's like the red flag goes down out here, and Prince of Wales and River Road become speedways. So my question is, I know the people out here are wondering, should we all make a police report? Do we all make a police report and talk about it, report it? What do we do?
Thank you for the question. It's an important one. First of all, a lot of our ability to be in the right place at the right time and provide the right activities, sometimes engagement, sometimes education, sometimes environmental design, quite often recently enforcement, as we've talked about with the numbers. It requires a combination of our officers' experience in the city to be at those locations, as some of which you've mentioned yourself, to be proactive. Many other times it's because the community does phone into the police, either directly or through their council office. As I've said, it's probably the #1 complaint I receive from councillors and that they receive from their constituents, as you've just alluded to. So we're happy to take it either way, either directly to our call center. Again, that would not be a 911 call unless it was actually dangerous driving that was putting the public in immediate risk, but it can be through our general call line. It can also come through your councillor's office, and the councillor can email us, and we will relay that information to our operational commanders for a response.
Thank you, Chief. I appreciate that. And we will all do that.
Great, thank you very much, Member Meehan. Are there any other questions for the chief on his report?
Yes, Sandy,
Yes.
this is Robert Sueda. Thank you,
That's
Chair.
great.
I finally made it on. I've been having some internet connections, so I might be breaking up. I'm not sure. But thank you again, Chair Sandy, and thank you, Chief. Chief, I have a question for you with regards to racism. I continue to receive calls from public with regards to racism. And the common question they're asking is, how do we track incidences of racism in the OPS, and what type of follow-ups happen after an incident has been flagged?
Member Sueda, thank you. It's a very important issue, and one I think that is important to every police service across the country, certainly right here, and not just because of recent incidents, because of the history of this challenge in this police service. I can't state enough in my faith in the Ottawa Police Service and the vast majority of its members who understand their oath of office and the requirements of a professional to provide unbiased and objective, sensitive and compassionate police service. And that's what we do on a consistent, regular basis. But this is a challenge for this organization, as every police organization. I don't want to not answer your question right now, but if, with your permission, I'd like to revisit that question in the presentation that is going to be immediately following. I will say, though, right now our ability to receive reports and manage it at a high level is not where we need it to be. The presentation following, while not exclusively about this topic will substantially address this topic. If the presentation itself hasn't answered your question sufficiently, I would ask if you could repeat the question at the end of the presentation and allow us to take another attempt at answering it.
Thank you.
Is that good for you, Robert? I'm guessing yes. I think you're muted now. Okay, great. Are there any other questions for the chief? Not seeing any other questions. That the Ottawa Police Services Board receive this report for information.
Received.
Received, thank you. Okay, the number 3 on the agenda is the organizational priorities and changes. We have a presentation, and I think, Chief, I'll turn it over to you so that you can get that presentation underway.
Well, thank you very much. We're going to be showing the PowerPoint presentation now. So thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. Today, we've prepared this presentation on the organizational changes that we're making to support the board's priorities, to allow us to implement those priorities and to move the organization forward. I will provide in the first phase of the presentation an overview of the changes, along with a deeper dive on some of the new specific initiatives that have been put in place over the last 2 months. You will then hear from Superintendent Isabel Granger and her leadership team about the new Respect, Values, and Inclusion Directorate that I referenced in my main report to the board a few minutes ago. Following that, you will hear from Acting Deputy Chief Joan McKenna, who on behalf of the board and the service will make a presentation about a joint project on workplace sexual violence and harassment. Just ask that we advance the slides to slide 1. I think the board and the public will be familiar with the chart on what is on the right-hand side of the screen that outlines the board's priorities for the service to deliver. The bullet points on the left-hand side of the screen are an example of some of the major activities and investments that the organization has undertaken in the last 6 months to a year on advancing those priorities. Recent investments include the creation of the EDI action plan that was presented to the board in February of this year, the creation of the EDI unit, that's Equity, Diversity, Inclusion unit, that was just recently created as part of the Respect, Values, and Inclusion Directorate. The creation of 2 specific positions, the Staff Sergeant Major and the Ceremonial Sergeant Major, which I will speak about in more detail very shortly, along with the project that I referenced on workplace sexual violence and harassment that Acting Deputy McKenna will speak about substantively in the last portion of this presentation. In advancing member wellness, we've made substantial net new funding and staff investments dedicated to health and wellness, the creation of the EDI unit, and the RVI Directorate in 2020. In advancing the modernization of the work environment, we're now presenting the new Ottawa Police Service organizational chart, including the new Respect, Values, and Inclusion Directorate. There'll be additional changes unfold over the next year. The next major round of changes will take place in July 2020. And finally, advancing community policing, which I alluded to in my earlier report to the board, that we've doubled the number of neighborhood resource teams in 2020 from 3 to 6. Next slide. While this report is not exclusively about equity, diversity, and inclusion, about ethics and values and respect in the organization, it is primarily about that. Because there's nothing more important to the health and wellness of our members, and nothing more important to the trust and confidence that the community has in our members and the service than the issue of a respectful workplace. One that promotes equity, diversity, and inclusion internally and delivers that in terms of service delivery to the community. This is a history of activities over the last decade that the Ottawa Police Service has led. While I don't want to overstate, I cannot understate this list. It is a record of innovation, virtually unequaled by any other police service in Ontario or in Canada. I repeat again, it's the reason why I chose to come here and to be the chief of this organization. It's the reason why I chose to bring and raise my family in the city, because of institutions like the Ottawa Police Service and their dedication to innovation to address these very vexing and complex issues that every organization, policing or otherwise, faces. I want to recognize in particular the bottom third of that list, most of which has been implemented in the last 6 months. The Community Equity Council, which has been formed and rejuvenated over the last year. The EDI action plan, which brought together many of the recommendations in the previous bullet points above. The workplace harassment work, which I alluded to, is just kicked off as a joint project between the board and the service, and a high-risk case management process, which I think will substantially address the questions that Member Sueda put to me just before this presentation began. But that last bullet point at the bottom of the page is probably the most important one, that more needs to be done and better needs to be done and will be done. Next slide, please. This is a high-level overview of the organizational chart, the new organizational chart, which is being implemented here in the Ottawa Police Service. Some of these pieces have been put in place over the last month. In March, we realigned and redefined the roles of the executive officer. We mainstreamed and made permanent the position of Staff Sergeant Major and Ceremonial Sergeant Major. Those are the positions in the red box on the chart. And we announced the implementation of the Respect, Values, and Inclusion Unit, which is in the serrated green circle on the right-hand side of the page. There'll be 2 other Chiefs Directorates, which will be formed fully over the next 9 months. That includes the new Chief Strategy Officer position, which will combine the corporate communications and our current policy planning and analytics units into one directorate. There will be a new directorate for General Counsel, which will include legal services and our professional standards services. The merging together of these different business functions will create new synergies, new capabilities, allow a greater reach into our organization, more impact for our individual members, greater confidence in the use of those capabilities by our members, and improve the ability of the organization to deliver on its priorities and demonstrate the effectiveness of the delivery of those priorities to our members and to the community. We will be expanding and focusing additional resources into the areas of intelligence-led policing, as well as neighborhood policing in the remaining portions of the organization chart. I'll be bringing this matter back to the board and to the public in the July board meeting, where we will do a deeper dive into all sections of the proposed organization chart. The board had an overview at the public policy committee meeting a month ago, where we provided a deeper dive into this. But for the purposes of today's presentation, I want to focus most of our time on the new Respect, Values, and Inclusion Unit, as well as the other functions that advance member wellness, health, and morale. Next slide, please. So, some particular positions that have been either enhanced or created. The executive officer position is a long-standing position that many chiefs of police have made various changes to over the course of time. I would suggest of these 4 new positions, this is the least change, but for me, one of the most impactful. The title of this slide may be a little bit mysterious to people watching, but I will be very explicit. It's called ground truth from an internal perspective. Oftentimes, a chief of police or a chief executive officer is one of the most lonely positions, and one where, despite the best efforts of all the members of the organization, the least amount of direct feedback and direct information and direct insights come to that office. And for that reason, I have reorganized certain positions like the executive officer and institutionalized other positions to allow me to get more direct, unfiltered truth, information, perspective from the ground, from our frontline members, men and women in every part of the organization, providing vital services either directly to community or in support of those who provide those services to community. The executive officer will serve as a direct representative of the office of the chief to the whole of the organization and to the whole of the city of Ottawa. There's only one of me, and as much as I try to put in a full day's work for a full day's pay, I require an individual of senior capability and senior officer status to be able to allow more access to the office of the chief, and in turn, to be able to represent the office more directly to more members internally and more community members externally. That is the new and focused role of the executive officer. The next one is the Service Sergeant Major. It has its history in our Canadian military. It serves as a direct and unfiltered point of contact between the frontline members and the office of the chief. Its specific focus is on those members who are actually in the roles of delivering service directly to the community, in the community, with the community, for the community. It focuses on our members' health, their safety, their ability to deliver service, their ability individually and collectively to advance the priorities of the organization. And again, it provides unfiltered access to those members directly to me as a chief of police, and it provides unfiltered messages and contact and context from me as a chief of police directly to them. The second position is a Corps Sergeant Major or Ceremonial Sergeant Major. This serves as the direct and unfiltered contact between frontline members and the office of the chief. Its specific focus is on the preparation of our members to go out into the community and deliver services or to support those members in the community. It is focused on issues like deportment, dress, equipment, values, morale, esprit de corps. It allows our folks to be as healthy, as positive, as cohesive, as objective as possible for when they go out and deliver those critically important services. The next area of ground truth are employee resource groups. Full credit to my predecessors who initiated this program and to other police agencies across Canada who have similar programs. Employee resource groups are internal members at every rank, but particularly supervisory and senior ranks, who provide additional mentoring, coaching, and supports to traditionally underrepresented members of the service, civilian and sworn, at every rank and in every role across the organization. Up until now, they have been informal and supported to a relatively limited degree. With the creation of the new RVI Directorate, additional resources in those areas, and additional funds, closer contact with the Office of the Chief, these ERGs will provide much higher levels of mentoring, coaching, and support. We believe it will expand the number of members engaged in the ERGs, and again, provide a much wider and deeper set of insights and truth to the Office of the Chief to understand the issues affecting our members and to identify the best solutions from those members to resolving those issues. Next slide. There's another type of ground truth that is critically important for the Office of the Chief and the Command, and that is a truth that comes directly from our community themselves. We established the Community Equity Council on the basis of recommendations that came from some of those initiatives that I outlined earlier. The Community Equity Council is composed of a group of equity, diversity, inclusion subject matter experts, as well as a broad group of demographic, not-for-profit, and sector stakeholders. This group meets on a regular basis. They provide direct, meaningful input, again, unfiltered, to the Chief, the Command, and the senior leadership team of the Ottawa Police Service. They provide input on community concerns while also identifying opportunities to improve trust, community confidence. They facilitate open dialogue. They engage in difficult conversations. And they help us to address some of the most contentious and contextual issues that we're dealing with right now. The Community Equity Council has been directly involved in the development, implementation, and evaluation of Ottawa Police Service initiatives, projects, and priorities, not the least of which is the EDI Action Plan. This is one of many organizations that have been created over the course of time, but certainly the one that is most recent, and I believe the most impactful for me so far to date. It would be wrong of me not to identify a few others, not least of which is the Violence Against Women Advisory Committee that has helped us to advance the issue of violence against women in the service and in the city. And I'd like to talk more about that later on, and we'll hear more about the important role that that group and others will play in the project to address workplace sexual violence and sexual harassment. Next slide, please. I've referenced the new Respect, Values, and Inclusion Directorate. And I've referenced the promotion of Isabel Granger to superintendent and the leader of a team of leaders within that new directorate. I'm going to turn things over very shortly to Isabel Granger and allow her to introduce her team. I believe that the team of leaders that have been established within the new RVI Directorate are a bit of a dream team. They're people with deep expertise, deep experience, and deep personal commitment to the issue of advancing respect, values, and inclusion to all members of the Ottawa Police Service, and through all those members, to all members of the City of Ottawa. I'm very proud of the work that they've been doing in a very short period of time. While we have not solved all the problems, we have taken major strides on a long journey towards the resolution of some of those complex and vexing issues that this organization has been facing in recent time and over the long haul. And I am quite confident that we will be able to tackle these issues in new and better ways than we've ever been able to do before. It won't be perfect, but it won't be because we don't have a perfect effort and perfect intensity of effort. It'll simply because it's a very difficult set of issues to tackle. I'm going to turn things over now to Superintendent Isabel Granger. Isabel?
Thank you, Chief. Chair Smallwood and members of the board, the Respect, Values and Inclusion Directorate will allow us to take a whole of service approach to issues related to equity, diversity, inclusion, and respect, ethics, and values. This approach will allow us, it will ensure that we look for real solutions which take into account all aspects of the collective experiences and realities of our community and our members. Taking this an approach that looks at the uniqueness of individuals in our organization introduces the concept of intersectionality. And in equity, diversity, and inclusion in gender, intersectionality refers to the theoretical framework that helps us to understand how aspects of an individual's social and political identities, such as gender, race, class, sexuality, ability, and other aspects might combine to create unique experiences for some members. And some of those experiences might result in systemic bias and or discrimination. So an intersectional approach ensures overall member inclusion. It promotes better practices, sound policies, and decision-making in a manner which is equitable and respectful to our members. It also allows for the implementation of evidence-based organizational and systemic change strategies, which supports community safety and well-being. I must add that the RVI will not be the panacea to solve all problems. However, it will allow us to build institutional capacity in EDI and REV, in equity, diversity, and inclusion, and respect, ethics, and values, and allow us to build capacity in the rest of OPS to be able to identify and eliminate systemic barriers that impede the safety and well-being of our members. It will also ensure that we provide culturally appropriate services which are fair and equitable to the Ottawa community, particularly to the underrepresented and traditionally marginalized groups. The directorate is divided into two sections. The REV, we call it, is Respect, Ethics, and Values, which is led by Director Deborah Arano, and it will focus on respectful workplace and ethics. This section will be mandated to implement proactive and responsive strategies to improve professional, ethical, values-based behavior in all members and in the OPS as a whole. The second section, EDI, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, led by Director David Snoddy, will focus on bringing the broader membership together by implementing inclusive practices and leading and incorporating systemic change throughout the organization. You will be hearing from Deborah and David shortly. So in terms of outcomes for member impacts, when fully aligned, we should see greater transparency and resolution. The members will see greater transparency and resolution, and because we'd be developing a more streamlined conflict management system. We should see a reduction in complaints as organizational capacity increases. We might even see an increase in complaints as people begin to trust us and come forward with the issues. We also should see increased morale, wellness, and confidence, and trust and inclusion. And in terms of community impacts, the community recognizing that OPS is taking this seriously and is well invested in it. And we should see improved relationships, citizen engagement, officer safety, community-led intelligence, because when people trust us, they are more willing to provide information to help us solve problems. And we should see improved trust and confidence, especially with traditionally marginalized communities. And of course, the bottom line for all this is value for money. And I'm going to turn it over to Deborah now to talk about her section.
Good afternoon. My name is Deborah Arano, and I'm the Director of Respect, Ethics, and Values. I'm very excited to brief you on the Respect, Ethics, and Values REV section. Although Respectful Workplace program has been around since 2008, I have been looking forward to the time that I would be able to build a new and improved conflict management system, including an ethics program. With Chief Slowly at the helm, this has become a reality. I believe the best way forward is to have two streams, a proactive one and a reactive one. This means we will increase the staffing model by putting in a staff sergeant who will oversee these two streams. On the reactive side of the house, that will require a revamping of the current Respectful Workplace program. The RWP was a pioneer in its time. However, many years have passed since its inception, and there is currently legislation governing these issues. So it requires a refresh in terms of process, policy, and of course, timely response. We will start by creating foundational changes to the process and policy and create a more efficient and robust complaint system by streamlining and mapping how complaints are made and handled. The intention is to then staff it with 2 sergeants, one to do mediations and one to do investigations. On the proactive side, the plan is to staff it with a sergeant who will support the ethics and risk detection portfolio at the OPS. This person will also be instrumental in rolling out the ethics framework. There's a lot of work to be done. Research has shown that it takes 21 days to change a habit, and that refers to an individual. We are trying to change a culture, which is a collective endeavor. The hope is that by creating a governance structure, having appropriate metrics in place that will track trends, along with the introduction of a helpline where members can raise dilemmas of an ethical nature, along with an ethics consultation team that will span all areas and ranks of the service, that OPS will be able to get to a place where we can better handle issues before they turn into complaints or unwelcome behavior. And with that said, I thank you very much for your time, and I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, David Snoddy.
Hello, everyone. My name is David Snoddy. I'm the Director of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. I've been with the Ottawa Police Service now since 2013. No stranger to this work. I've worked at the provincial level for a number of years, and a good portion of that at the Ontario Police College. And this has always been a central part of my portfolio. And it's just so exciting to see the Ottawa Police actually, along with the board, who's been very supportive, raise the profile and the need for equity, diversity, and inclusion as a key part of how we move this work forward. Often I'm asked why EDI, what does it mean? And just for the audience, diversity is the factual components that we know day in and day out, that usually it's the numbers that people focus on. So all those different dimensions of who we are as, you know, as a parent, as a male, as our faith, our languages, and hidden identities that often aren't seen on people, such as sexual orientation or faith and disability. All of that can be quantified as we have done through our numerous census, and that's known as diversity, the part of the work. Equity is the principle and the practices that are used to look at the policies, the decision-making, the culture within organizations that need to shift in order to ensure a fair and equitable distribution of how those are applied day in and day out. And when done well, and when done over a sustained period of time, it leads to authentic inclusion, meaning that all of those assets that people bring with them to work are being fully leveraged, are being celebrated, acknowledged, and no one is experiencing barriers or discrimination based on one of those identifiable grounds and aspects of their identity. I often say that EDI work is a journey, it's not a destination. However, it does have very specific milestones, and this marks an incredible milestone for the Ottawa Police Service. And so far, while the OPS has led the way on some groundbreaking areas, much of them have been done as a reactive or project and very selective. And this now, this new directorate now creates an incredible opportunity for us to lay the foundation, which will drive the strategy drive number of strategies across the organization. And according to senior leaders surveyed, the importance of EDI as part of a business strategy, 90% agree or strongly agree that it's an absolute imperative. And they state that because EDI contributes to their organization's overall performance. It contributes to more innovation, creativity, and enhanced problem solving. So alignment of multiple projects and initiatives and recommendations into a centralized directorate, we now have the foundation to drive many of those strategies forward in an organized and systematic way. And through the centralized expertise, there is more impactful influence on various systems to ensure that those policies, decision-making, and practices are equitable, fair, and inclusive. The OPS now has a good foundation, and it's time to bridge that foundation with both those external ground truths that the chief referenced and the internal ground truths And we're so fortunate to have a number of different stakeholders that we can tap into to help inform. So as we move forward, the EDI action plan, which was approved in February with the board and is the most publicly facing output at this point, that will be a key driver within the EDI unit. I just wanted to reference that there are multiple recommendations. I'll talk about that shortly. And the new section will be guided by those priorities and work through them systematically with a critical eye on how interdependent various parts of the system can be, and to ensure that we're looking for those unintended consequences, those barriers, and working to remove those. Guided by good evidence, such as the Ontario Human Rights Commission policy frameworks, along with the Global Diversity and Inclusion benchmark standards, the EDI section will use a systems approach to continue its work. We will absolutely have a focus on human rights, anti-Black racism, and all forms of systemic discrimination. These will continue to be key areas of focus of this new section of work. So working with the many partnerships that the chief had talked about earlier, along with the city's new anti-racism secretariat, Ottawa Equity, to name a few, as well as our employee resource groups, patrol advisory, our peer support and wellness. There's so many opportunities. We'll be working with them to give us both that internal and external perspective. Some of the work of the new section will be familiar to what is currently part of my former sections, community development and diversity race relations. And some of the work within those two areas will be better aligned to support the enhanced work in community policing and neighborhood-based policing. And some of it that is more strategic in focus will remain with the EDI section. More to come on that as those changes align over the coming weeks and months. Wanted to reference that on the EDI action plan, which are sort of what you're seeing on the deck here, there are internal outputs and there are some that are more focused internally. I won't go through each of those because they were presented as part of the approval in February. But I do want to highlight a couple of things. The approved plan contains 10 priority action items. Half of them are complete or on track for completion for June. Despite the impact of COVID-19, we are catching up and should only experience a couple of delays as we move forward. We're still on track to deliver all 10 priority action items by year end. We will be working closely with Community Equity Council to help monitor, implement, and ensure evaluation against intended outcomes of the action plan. And the CEC, our Community Equity Council, has already set up a dedicated action plan committee that will meet monthly with the EDI staff to assist and help with that monitoring and that implementation. And you'll recall that the action plan and the 2020 priority action items were based on priority setting workshops with both police and community members. There are actually over 200 recommendations that we've inventoried that come from different reports, some of them even spanning back a few decades, and in most recently, including the diversity audit. And we've not lost sight of those original recommendations, and we're tracking our outputs based on that master plan so that we can align with the work going forward and make sure that we don't lose sight of those multiple recommendations. And as the organization continues its alignment, continues to grow and mature along this journey, and as the organization gets healthier and more authentically inclusive, it will provide the services deserved and expected. It will retain, promote, recruit, and attract the diverse talent that will continue to enhance the performance, innovation, creativity, and problem solving. I want to thank the chief and the board for their support. Looking forward to the work that we will do together as we go forward. And now I'd like to hand the presentation over to Acting Deputy McKenna for the next portion of the presentation.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and board members. So the Ottawa Police Board and the Ottawa Police Service are working on a strategy on workplace violence and harassment. We have a scorecard right now where we know that this exists at all levels within the Ottawa Police Service. We have members that are charged with sexual assault. We have human rights complaints. And we know that our gender audit dealt with sexual discrimination, but we needed to take it one step forward to deal with sexual violence and harassment that is in our workplace. We are not the only organization that is facing these challenges. We have a work environment where we want to be the employer of choice, and we want to recruit the best recruits. And more importantly, we want to retain them. But there are risks and consequences if we do not work jointly on this. There's a cost to our employees and the financial impact. And more importantly, it's the impact on the involved persons that face these situations. We need to create a burning platform for cultural change. Our gender and diversity audit, our EDI action plan has spoke to some of the steps that we are moving forward with. There is a need for change now, which is supported by our Police Services Board and our internal leadership. It's an issue for all of us that starts at grassroots level to be a champion for it. Next slide. Our mission, and it is in draft form, is to eliminate workplace sexual violence and harassment in the Ottawa Police Service by creating and maintaining a supportive and inclusive work environment for all members. And we want to ensure an overall organizational culture of respect, openness, and high standards for professional and equitable policing that is reflective of our core values. Next slide. These are draft building blocks that we will work out in consultation with both external community members as well as internal. We need to have a better understanding of the sexual violence and harassment problem at the Ottawa Police Service. We need to be able to support our members who come forward and disclose issues. We need to create a safe space for them and a third-party reporting option. We need to do a better job in how we respond to sexual violence and harassment in a coordinated and timely way to keep our members informed and updated on the process. We need to develop better strategies on how to prevent incidents of sexual violence and harassment in our workplace so that all come to work in a healthy environment. Next slide, please. Our draft governance model is jointly with the Ottawa Police Service Board and the Ottawa Police Executive Team. The Ottawa Police Chair and the Chief will be our co-chairs of the executive. I am your executive sponsor, and we have a core project team internally that are subject matter experts. Superintendent Granger is the co-chair of that team, and her team will continue to lead this because this is not just a now, but it's continuing into the future. We will create an external advisory committee because we want to ensure we have an eyes on and we want to learn lessons that other services, other agencies have gone through so we can learn from them. We want to be open, transparent, and accountable to them. Our internal advisory committee, it's an opportunity for members who have experienced sexual harassment and violence in the workplace to come forward and help us move in the right direction. Our core working team is myself and Superintendent Granger that will be chair. And again, we want to reach out to our internal members and get their input and advice to ensure we're moving on the right direction. Next slide, please. We want to work with working groups internally for an opportunity to come forward and voice where they feel we need to work on avenues to support, prevent sexual harassment and violence in the workplace. Our internal advisory and focus groups will provide us that direction. our external advisory groups, Optiva, who we will be looking from a different lens to provide us input and guidance on our language that is involved. Our Community Equity Council is another tool, another group that we will leverage and use. It's a long-term go forward continuity through our RVI Directorate. Next slide, please. And we'll turn it back over to the chief.
Thank you very much, Joan. I also want to thank again Isabel, Deb, and Dave. I hope the board, while you're familiar with these leaders, I hope through the board to the public, people will get a sense of the level of expertise, experience, and dedication that these leaders and many other in the organization, many of whom don't have rank and aren't running any directorates or units or projects, but are equally committed and equally excellent within this organization, who have their own partnerships and networks outside of the organization, and who will help to advance these many difficult issues. The OPS is dealing with some very, very real and major challenges right now with some of our members, and quite frankly, with our organization, its systems, its culture, its history, the trust the community has in it, and our ability to demonstrate different activities, most importantly, different outcomes. I want to be clear that any type of misconduct is unacceptable in the Ottawa Police Service. Our members expect more from their organization, as do the community. We need to do better, and we will. A very reasonable and important question was asked very, very recently of the service. How many members have been involved with workplace sexual violence or sexual harassment? How many victims have come forward? It took a while because these systems are not well connected in the organization. But we have that answer, and I want to provide it today. One of the major reasons why we spent so much time in this presentation on the new Respect, Values, and Inclusion Directorate, the subunits, and this very important joint project was to help to understand that while we're good, we need to be better. We need to have answers, not just the answers to these questions, but the solutions. And not just the solutions, but the demonstrated advances against these solutions and the implementation of them. In 2018, the Ottawa Police Service had 1 reported incident of workplace sexual violence, 3 reported incidents of workplace sexual harassment. This included 5 female complainants. In 2019, the Ottawa Police Service had 1 reported incident of workplace sexual violence, 2 reported incidents of workplace sexual harassment. This included 6 different female members of the Ottawa Police Service. Year to date in 2020, we have 1 incident of reported workplace sexual harassment. This involves 3 female members of the Ottawa Police Service. I want to be clear. While this demonstrates some confidence in our systems, some confidence by our members to report workplace violence, and sexual harassments internally, it clearly is not a likely representation of the depth of this issue facing the Ottawa Police Service. I received a statistic today from one of our important community partners. It says that Statistics Canada did an analysis of workplace sexual harassment across Canada. According to Statistics Canada, 4% of women in a workplace and 1% of men will report experiencing sexual harassment at work in the last year. Clearly, the statistics I just read out to you from the Ottawa Police Service represents an underreporting against this average that Statistics Canada has provided. We need to do more, and we need to do better, and we will. I want to be clear. As Chief, I am fully committed to improving the Ottawa Police Service's ability to prevent and reduce incidents of workplace sexual violence and harassment, while enabling increased reporting of harassment, decreased fear of reprisal, and better support to the survivors of those incidents. The Ottawa Police Service is an amazing organization. It is diverse but imperfect, filled with amazing, diverse but imperfect human beings, which includes me. We work in one of the most dynamic, demanding, and dangerous professions delivering 24/7, 365 services to one of the most amazing, diverse, but imperfect cities. As a work family and as police professionals, we need to acknowledge the range of moral injuries that some of our members have been suffering at the hands of other members at all ranks and all roles in this organization. An all too silent majority, immature risk management systems, individual acts of omission, and less than consistently courageous leadership enables oppressors and disables victims. These are all areas for improvement, and they must include, in fact, they must start with myself and the office of the chief, and then down and up throughout the entire organization. All OPS members deserve a healthier, safer, and more respectful workplace. I want to specifically assure all female OPS members and all women considering a career with the Ottawa Police Service that my command team, my executive team, my senior leadership team, my Ottawa Police family will act decisively and continuously to end sexual harassment, gender-based violence, or any other form of bullying in the workplace. Under my tenure of police chief with the Ottawa Police Service, we will continue to make additional major investments to fix our house, to increase the health, wellness, and safety of all of our members, to create a harassment-free organization, and to advance equity, diversity, and inclusion in the Ottawa Police Service. When we see and experience things like racism, sexism, harassment, or disrespect in any form, they need to be addressed. We have to do something, the right thing. These conversations are tough for all of us, and they're tough for me as a leader of this organization. I am in a conundrum every time that I attempt to address an individual, a group, or a systemic issue in the Ottawa Police Service. I am inevitably accused of overstating or understating the issue. Some stakeholders will perceive that I am painting every member of the organization with the same brush and condemning the entire organization. I am not. Other stakeholders will say that I haven't gone far enough in condemning the organization's culture and its history of misconduct and public trust. I will not do anything other than advance this organization. My job is not to please everyone. It is to move the organization and all of its members forward so that they in turn can provide the best possible service to the 1 million residents of Ottawa. This is what I've been doing since day one on the job, and this is what I will continue to do until my last day on the job. These are difficult discussions from hardworking questions, and it results from courageous conversations. And I promise you that we need to do all of these things on the first day that I took office. We need to look at ourselves, we need to own our issues, we need to work together to implement sustainable solutions. It takes courage and strength, individually and collectively, to do this. And we have it, and we will do it. In conclusion, Chair and Board and public, the new organizational design will enable innovation that the Ottawa Police Service has been renowned for, but it will better ensure the effective implementation that will lead to the actual needed changes in the organization. The Ottawa Police Services Board and the Ottawa Police Service are fully committed to preventing and reducing incidents of workplace sexual violence and harassment, supporting survivors, enabling increased reporting, and decreased reprisals. The new RVI Directorate will advance equity, diversity, inclusion, respect, ethics, and values in the Ottawa Police Service. It will reduce all aspects of workplace bullying, harassment, and violence. We have made a strong start, but we have much more to do. We will have additional updates to the board and to the public as to the additional advancements of this new organizational chart. And most importantly, we'll be prepared to answer those very tough questions being asked of us by our members and members of the community. Thank you very much, and I'll turn things back over to Chair Smallwood.
Thank you very much, Chief. I think as you've stated very clearly, this is an extremely important issue for the service and for the board. And I want to thank you for this excellent presentation. And I want to thank the OPS staff, and particularly Isabel Granger and David and Debbie for the very informative presentation. And I'd also like to, in particular, comment on the project that Acting Deputy Chief Joan McKenna is leading on sexual harassment and violence in the workplace. You stated it, and I think the board feels very strongly, sexual harassment and violence have no place in society and therefore no acceptable place in our workplaces. As an employer, the board, in collaboration with the chief, has a responsibility for taking steps to prevent and respond to sexual harassment and violence in the workplace. We know that sexual harassment in particular is more common in male-dominated work environments such as policing. We have been taking many positive steps forward from an equity, diversity, and inclusive perspective to try and promote the Ottawa Police Service as an employer of choice for all. We need to make sure that the workplace we are inviting applicants to join is just as welcoming and inclusive. The board established equity, diversity, and inclusion as a strategic priority in our last business planning cycle. We have done some key foundational work: the gender audit, diversity audit, changes to recruiting, creating an EDI office, EDI action plan, and now the Respect Values Inclusion Directorate. We'll be approaching this issue both internally with our members and leadership, as well as externally, leveraging the expertise of our community partners such as Octiva and the CEC. And these two are extremely important to us because they are outside voices that can help us to identify areas that maybe we need to put additional attention to. I think the approach we are taking will help us tackle this problem from all necessary angles. And while I'll be sitting on the External Advisory Committee, I think it would be helpful to have a member of our HR committee sit on the core working group as well. And so with the board's consent, I would like to recommend that member Nerman sit on the core working group. Does the board agree to that?
I agree.
Is there anybody that's in opposition to that? So I think that at this point, what I'd like to do is turn it over to board members. I'm sure that there'll be many who wish to raise some questions. And I see Carol Ann has her hand up, so I'll turn it to Carol Ann to start off.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I do support that Member Neerman join that committee. I think he'll be wonderful in the position. I do applaud all the work that's been done to reorganize many of these committees, and I applaud you on that. The question I have, and I know sometimes it's systemic and it's very difficult to challenge, but Chief, you know what we've been hearing is that there are several more complainants in the police force right now who would like to come forward with some allegations of sexual harassment, but are afraid to. So I'm just wondering, while we reveal this plan tonight, what do you say to women who are in the force right now who are reluctant to come forward? What's your message to them?
My message to them is very simple. Do come forward. That simple message doesn't ignore the reality that many members face around coming forward under any circumstances for any act of misconduct, that they are required to and feel that they should come forward and report. It's always a very difficult decision to make. We recognize the difficulty of that, particularly as it relates to sexual violence, sexual harassment. One of the reasons why we've announced this joint board and service initiative is that we can explore very quickly other options than currently exist. Members can report to their chain of command. Members can report directly to our professional standards branch. Members can report directly to my office. But for all the reasons we've discussed and many more, they're reluctant to do so. So we're looking out into the industry for best practices. We're seeing in both the public sector and the private sector other options where members can feel more confident to come forward about these allegations, but not necessarily even within the organization. So we're seeing external third-party agents, ombudsperson, third-party not-for-profit organizations that provide that reporting mechanism while still allowing the issue to be addressed primarily through internal mechanisms. One of the efforts that we hope this new working group will do is explore this opportunity as quickly as possible and either rule it out or, quite frankly, rule it in, and we'll implement it if it's ruled in as quickly and as effectively as we possibly can.
But in
answer to your question again,
yeah.
The number one thing is not to continue to be victimized, not to be alone, there is somebody within this organization, an employee resource group, a supervisor who you have confidence and trust in, a senior officer, a male or female leader, someone you can come forward to. Do not be alone. Do not sit on this alone. Act on it in some way.
I appreciate that. I really do. And I would encourage any woman in that position to do exactly as you have directed here today. But you know that reprisals can be very subtle. And that's hard to tackle. Can you address that?
If I was looking for an easy job, I wouldn't have taken this one. And these issues are hard to tackle. They're often extremely subtle, from bullying and workplace mobbing through to harassment and the reprisals against harassers. This is one of those most unknown areas in policing. And that's why it's one of the most under-resolved areas in policing. For whatever combination of reasons, and not just in the Ottawa Police Service, we have not fully turned our individual and collective minds. We have not fully resourced and invested in these issues so that we can all understand to a greater degree how important this issue is, how devastating it is to our members, the many different ways that we can now currently address it, and in the future through other innovative practices, better address it. That's exactly what we're trying to do here. With all that said, there will still be times where we fail to provide the right avenue, the right supports. We fail to understand the subtlety and the complexity of the circumstances, but I'm not afraid of failing. I'm only afraid of not trying and not trying to do better. And so far, I have a team of leaders in this organization, a leadership team on the board, and many leaders in the community who are willing to try with us. Try and fail, yes, but try to succeed. Definitely, that is the goal and the commitment that I will have for the rest of my tenure, have from the beginning of my tenure, and will for the rest of my tenure here with the Ottawa Police Service.
Thank you, Chief. Just one last comment. Do you think it's time for us to implement some tougher punishments for people who are found guilty of this offense? Because obviously it continues because they don't believe that there's going to be repercussions. I firmly believe that they're within the culture, there's not going to be, no one's going to lose their job. Is it time that feeling is put aside, that there's going to be serious reprisals if someone is found to be guilty of this, and meting out retribution to people who have blown the whistle on them? I think it's time for that myself. Your comments on that?
Thank you. I think it's time for us to be a lot more serious at every element of the spectrum. Serious about how we provide options for members to report this. Serious about how we provide supports to survivors of this. Serious about how we coordinate, in some cases deconflict, the various investigations and interventions into this. Serious about how we protect members against reprisals. Serious about how we conduct the investigations and, in the right cases, mediations, other interventions, prosecutions, and potentially up to the level of separations from the organization. I will say though, and I'm learning about this as a leader within this organization, I'm learning about this as a member of this society, that sometimes heavier penalties and more punishment don't actually solve the larger problem. I'm willing to consider anything, including heavier penalties and more direct punishments for those that continue to willfully ignore and flout the rules and the oath in office. But I'm also willing to try new tools, mediation, restoration, truth and reconciliation, in the right cases, for the right reasons, to move the organization in the right direction. I support your passion and your energy and your commitment to do it better and do it right. But I have to look at the full range of tools available to me as a police chief and a leader of an important institution in this city. And so I'll be serious at every level of this issue.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Member Mann. Are there any other questions for the chief? I'm not seeing any others right now, so, oh.
Hi, Sandy.
Yes, Mayor.
Hi, just a couple of things. On the changes, Chief, that you're proposing here with these new additional staff sergeants and so on, are these included in the budget? How many new positions are being created as a result of the reorg? Are you in a position to reduce any other positions to offset all these new ones? And what's the cost?
Thank you for the question, Mayor. As I've committed to from literally my first board meeting and my first day in office, we will work within the budget envelope while I use the resources that the city has provided through the board's request for our operating budget. So there will be no new increase to our operating budget. And given the impacts of COVID-19, as I provided in my first report to the board in this board section, we're committed to reducing the impact of those costs and reducing the overall cost of the organization down to as close to net zero or below, even with the extra costs associated to COVID-19. All of the changes that we talked about today, and all of the future changes that will go into this organizational, new organizational chart will be within the operating budget envelope that we've been given and addressing the additional COVID cost impacts.
So how many new FTEs are there? Because I think most of these positions, the two, what were they called? The sergeant majors? Sergeant. So that you've got at least two sergeant majors. I heard a staff sergeant. One assumes there's some infrastructure around them, and they're leaving other positions, I assume, the sergeant majors. So that fills a void. You have to hire someone to fill their old position.
There are no new FTE positions, Mayor. We are converting positions from other places to put against our higher priorities. That's always the challenge of any leader, is to find the right resources to go against the highest priorities. I firmly believe if you're going to make health and wellness, addressing member concerns around bullying and harassment and workplace violence, that you have to put your most important resource against your highest priorities. And that's exactly what we've done. We've redeployed resources within our envelope to go against the board's highest priorities. And that's what we've done in this case. There are no new requests for additional resources in this reorganization.
So if an officer is charged with sexual violence or sexual assault, why do we not release the name? If a regular citizen was charged with that, would that not be in the public record?
So these are internal matters. They are member human resource matters, and we would not normally release the information of internal member matters to the public. We do have exceptions around criminal charges laid against members that have a public-facing impact. Not that none of these don't have a public impact in terms of trust and our ability to deliver services, but they are for the most part internal member employee issues that must be dealt with internally. I want to touch on something though. I'm not sure if it's in your question, Mayor, but no member should have their internal matters leaked out of this organization for any reason or in any way. And in some of the more recent cases, as well as in some of the many cases that preceded my arrival here in Ottawa, that has happened. And there is no excuse for that, any more than there is any excuse for workplace misconduct, workplace violence, or workplace harassment. And we are taking direct steps to address the issue of leaks of information from within the Ottawa Police Service that have their own effect of victimizing our members in this organization. And my responsibility is to protect all members of this organization against that type of leak. And they often find themselves within these very cases themselves, workplace harassment, human rights cases, where information that should be internal and confidential becomes public.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Are there any other questions for the chief? I'm not hearing any other questions. So, Chief, I just wanted to say, you made a comment. You said that we need to do more and we need to do better. And I think I can safely assure you that the board is completely supportive and will support you in that, in your attempts to fulfill that. And we look forward to positive results as a result of this initiative. So that the Ottawa Police Services Board received this presentation for information. Is it received?
Received.
Received.
Thank you. We'll now go on to another item which was held, which is item, I believe it's item 7, which is the South Project Phase A update and increase to prime consultant contract. I had a couple of questions on this. I don't know if there are other board members that did. Caroline, you had a question?
Are you allowing me to ask it? now?
Yes, please, go
Oh,
ahead.
thanks, Ed. Yes, I do. I pass the location of the new South Campus every day, and I see work has begun, that which I find really quite encouraging. But the increase in funds that we're going to be approving for the architect's firm is the change in so I'm just trying to figure out, when we agree to pay them a certain amount of money, when we change it, that's not included in the whole cost of things. So we have to pay them additional to amalgamate those two designs. That's not part of the whole process. I guess that's my question.
Okay.
Why do we have to pay more?
Chief, did you want to answer that, or did you want to have Jeff answer that? Or I mean, I know the answer, but I think it'd probably be better if it came from Jeff or the chief.
Yeah, Chair, thank you. I'm going to ask CA Letourneau to respond to that question. Thank you.
Because it's not an insignificant amount of money.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Member Meehan. The changes being requested, the increases being requested in this report relate to a significant amount of changes that were incurred to ready the project and reduce cost efficiencies, reduce cost overruns, and implement value engineering designs into the previous design. So as the work progressed on the site, one of the significant things that was learned was there were significant challenges with the soil. And so one of the major changes that occurred was a change to the foundation. So that occurred back in the winter and late winter. Decisions were made. There were some cost overruns. The consultants helped develop some value engineering options to reduce those cost overruns. Those were since implemented into the design, and the work would be required to implement those into the tender packages and get them ready to move forward. So to answer your question, that work wasn't contemplated with the original contract, and in order for us to move forward with the project with new information, it's required that we move forward with this contract increase.
So can we just talk about the soil for a minute? Soil analysis wasn't done before we started, planning this and designing it?
No, there was lots of soil analysis done. However, as you continue to dig deeper and in different parts of the lot, the design was required to be changed. If you do recall, the original design was two separate buildings. Mm-hmm. This was changed a few years ago to bring it into one building with 3 floors. And so that drove changes. There were a significant number of efficiencies that were generated through that change, both on a cost perspective, but also on an effective use of the site perspective. By doing that, we're only using half the acreage. We're saving half the acreage for future potential use.
And does the soil have anything to do with that? Is the soil the determining factor for putting those 3 buildings into one?
No, the soil condition had nothing to do with that. That was done based on an effective use of the site, as well as how members are going to work. So having one building is open to all 3 levels. We want to create a more inclusive campus approach where members from different sections can mingle and work together in a shared, flexible environment.
Okay, so you say there's some cost efficiencies that have been built into this, but what does this do to the overall budget? Or does it do anything?
From an overall perspective, there's no impact to the operating budget for the service. This is a capital item, yeah. And it would be absorbed in the overall budget for the project, as well as for the facility strategic plan.
And are we still contemplating delaying this because of COVID and budget restraints?
Well, so the approach we've taken what we're basically asking for and presenting to the board in this report is a lot of work's been done on this project. This project started back in 2010. So it's 10 years in the making, significant amount of work over the last 5 years. And the plan was to actually have tendered by now. COVID-19 threw a wrench in this plan and in a lot of plans across the city. We've been working closely with city procurement and the city facilities folks, and the direction that we've come up with as a group and working with the city along with our prime consultants is to get everything tender ready and then wait and time the market to get the most advantageous pricing. Right now, it's very difficult to forecast what the tenders could come back at because of this environment.
And we don't even know if, what the future is going to hold in the way that we go to work.
Well, what I would say there is that this building has been designed for that in mind. If you recall from the presentations on the facility strategic plan in the past, the board had approved a plan that required a 25% efficiency in workspace, which required us to implement remote and alternative workplace strategies. One of the silver linings of this period that we're in right now is that it's proven to the service that we can have members work from home. We currently have 400 members, up to 400 members on a somewhat regular basis working remotely. And that was one of the design principles that was actually built into the South Building. It's important to recall that the South Building isn't just incremental to our footprint. There are 2 facilities that are being decommissioned due to various reasons, age, also road widening by the city. So our Leitrim facility, as well as the Greenbank facility, 2 major facilities in our portfolio will be decommissioned when the South facility comes online.
Okay. Okay, I think that's it, Jeff. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Jeff, while you're there, I had 2 questions. One was, I noticed in the review of the specifics, the tender specifics, it talks about the wider corridors work in terms of COVID ready, wider corridors, staircase and door openers. But I didn't read anything about desk spacing. And I just wondered whether or not that was something which has changed as a result of COVID. Are you increasing desk spacing?
Well, what I can say is that so the interior hasn't been fully and completely designed yet, but the design principle and approach is that the majority of the space is designed with flexible desk spacing, demountable partitions for walls that can be moved. It's important that flexibility is built into this facility so that as things change, we can evolve and adapt, and it doesn't cost a significant amount of money. So as we move through this process and finalize the design for the interior, we would take that into consideration.
So I guess my concern would be that with a greater spacing, there would be less ability to accommodate the same number of members, and that could impact on the space requirement. And I know you mentioned about more people working from home, but as you said, that has already been taken into account. So I guess we'll look forward to that comment coming out in future discussions. The other concern I had was with respect to this request for funds, is that my understanding is that this is to get the documents tender ready. And I think the concern I have is that we're getting them tender ready now with an expectation that we'll be able to go out to tender in a relatively short period. Should we see a second wave of COVID in the fall, that could once again delay things. And I guess my concern or question is, would we not be better to wait until the fall to see when we might realistically expect? Because if we get tender ready now, and there's a further delay, that money that's expended on getting us tender ready now will, to a certain extent, have been wasted.
Well, it's a good question, and we are happy to take direction from the board. What I would say is that the work that our facilities team, our facilities experts and professionals have put in, combined with their work with the city experts, our crime consultant experts, they're recommending that even though these are uncertain times, and the fact that because the design is 100% complete from an external perspective, the plan applications are quite a long ways away. Even if there is a delay to tender to time the market most optimally, that is 3 to 6 months. Even if it's 9 months, even if it's a year, this has been a project that's been 5 years in the making. The exterior design is not going to change much. We do have flexibility on the interior design, as I mentioned before, with the way that the interior has been set up with the flexible workspaces and the alternative workspaces. So I think the risk of that is quite low. There would be incremental costs associated with a delay. And the fact that it would take us 6 to 8 weeks to get tender ready from where we are now would cause us to potentially miss any optimal market timing.
Are there any other questions from any other board members? I guess we do have the opportunity of looking at delaying this, and I think the CAO has expressed his reasons why he feels we shouldn't, but it certainly is an option that the board has before it. Are there any other members who wish to comment?
Yes, Sandy, it's Robert Sweda.
Yes, Robert.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to follow up on what you were saying, there's a lot of people in the developers who are concerned to the points that Sandy raised, that if they start construction and there's another wave, the stopping a construction in midpoint could cause a lot of extra financial burden on developers. Is there going to be any contingency built in to any contract that is issued to a developer with that in mind?
So great question. Great question. So, and the answer is yes. So we're working closely with the city, and the city has a number of large construction projects on the go as well. And so we're building in that language to protect us if there are delays in construction. I can also say that the first year of construction for this project is all outdoors, and it will last over 14 months. And so there's a lot of work that will be occurring outdoors. And so the construction companies, even if there is a second wave, will be working outdoors. We've consulted with them already. The teams have consulted with them already, and they feel confident that they can work through a second wave because they are outdoors and they can implement social distancing and physical distancing. But there will be protection language in the contract that will ensure we're protected.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Jeff. Are there any other questions from any other board members? Not hearing any, so the recommendation is that the Ottawa Police Services Board approve an increase to Moriyama and Tashima's M&T and CS&P Architects contract of $1,190,000 excluding HST for a total contract value of $6,228,000. The increase includes $790,000 to implement value engineering changes to the contract documents and a $400,000 contract contingency for execution of the construction phase. Is this item carried?
Carried. Carried.
Is there anybody of dissent? I'm not hearing any dissents. So we'll move on to the next item, which is other business. Member Nerman, I believe you had a motion you wish to table.
Yes, Chair, and before I formally read the motion, I need your leave and permission to address a question and a motivation behind this motion to the board. May I?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. At the outset, first of all, I am thankful to the chair for putting my name forward and the board in approving the same for a very important committee on sexual violence and harassment. I will try to do my best and justice to this appointment. I also wish to recognize the services of our past member, Suzanne Velike, and wish her all the success in her endeavors. Dear Acting Chair, Mayor Watson, members of the board, chief and command, members of the service, and members of the public, I want to bring a motion forward today, but first want to offer an apology for not having had the chance to share this with all of you earlier. In improving my understanding of this issue and then in developing this motion, I have spoken with members of the police service, members of the community, few experts, as well as having reflected on my own experience, and some of these readings and conversations were taking place well into this afternoon. Given this timeline, my intention is simply to present this motion and to benefit from your experience and wisdom to refine it during the coming weeks to ensure it is helpful and constructive and moves us closer to the police service we all want and deserve as members of the community and as staff of the service. My motion has several parts, but all are aimed squarely at addressing the systematic racism and bias within the police service, irrespective of any caste or color or group of individuals, with the intention of reducing the inequities in police service delivery and supporting our collective vision of safe and healthy communities. At the same time, I am very alive to the great work that is being done today by the OPS under the Chief Slowly's leadership to address culture and improve systems so they are fairer and more transparent in their application and outcomes. Some of these initiatives and changes which I took time to review as well and are of course the EDI action plan, the important work of the Community Equity Council, the creation of the new Respect, Values and Inclusion Directorate, and the Working Group on Sexual Harassment and Violence. And again, while I applaud and fully support this work, it is my understanding and belief that lots more need to be done, as the chief during his presentation has agreed as well, on continuous basis. Like David has said, it is not the destination, it's the journey. In addressing the long-standing systematic and institutional structures that continue to disadvantage members of force at large, particularly the women, indigenous, racialized, and diverse member of the police service, and those same group within our community. I have firm belief that if we as an organizational effort, inclusive of all members, make a collective effort to elevate one and other, it could be a great beginning. This motion is meant to complement and build on the work that has already been done and which is being contemplated now. But it is also meant to address a critical gap that I believe exists in the current work plan, which is to acknowledge that racism continues to plague our society and by extension, possibly to the policing and the Ottawa Police Service. To name it where it exists and then to take a meaningful and visible action to address and correct it. We all need to do this together, and this needs to be done in a way that is supportive and inclusive of all members of the police service, that ensures that they feel valued for the work they do every day in the service of our residents and our community, and provides them the safe spaces and opportunities to learn and correct themselves as required as we advance towards the police service our community and members deserve. So with that, I will now present my motion and expect to have a more fulsome discussions on the content and intent of this motion in the coming weeks before it is considered into our next month regular board meeting. So I will be reading the motion, Chair, now.
Good. Please proceed.
Thank you. So whereas Article 1, Sub 1 of the United Nations Human Rights Office of the High Commissioner International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination defines racism as any distinction, exclusion, restriction, or preference based on race, color, descent, or national or ethnic origin, which has the purpose or effect of nullifying or impairing the recognition, enjoyment, or exercise on an equal footing of human rights and fundamental freedoms in the political, economic, social, cultural, or any other field of public life. Whereas subsection 5, sub 2 of the Ontario Human Rights Code states, every person who is an employee has a right to freedom from harassment in the workplace by an employer or agent of the employer or by another employee because of race, ancestry, place of origin, color, ethnic origin, citizenship, creed, age, record of offenses, marital status, family status, or disability. Whereas the board policy number CR16, Human Rights and Racial Profiling, states that the purpose of this policy is to state the board's commitment to policing that respects and adheres to the principles contained in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom and the Ontario Human Rights Code, and to set out the board's expectation with regard to respecting human rights in the delivery of police services. Whereas, since the introduction of the Equity, Diversity and Inclusion Action Plan, Chief Slowly and the Ottawa Police Service have taken a further step of creating the Directorate of Respect, Values and Inclusion, led by a superintendent, to strengthen the ability of the service to advance the 2020 goals and organizational culture more broadly. Also, in partnership with the Ottawa Police Services Board, the OPS has launched a special committee to address sexual violence and harassment in the workplace. And whereas the Ottawa OPSB and OPS have a demonstrated commitment to promoting the values of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and in continuing to build a workforce that is reflective of all the communities and the neighborhood it serves, and based on a review of the work that has been completed and now planned, and to ensure there is no gap in activities addressing systematic racism, which requires overt and sustained attention. Therefore, be it resolved that the Chief of Police be directed to act on the following set of recommendations. First, the efforts of the OPS to address its culture and structural inequalities should be whole of the organization initiative that is inclusive of all members, both women and men, Indigenous and LGBTQ, civilian and sworn. And further, the approach to this work must demonstrate an understanding and appreciation of unique contribution that every member makes in support of safe, healthy, and inclusive City of Ottawa, and their equally critical roles in creating a more equitable and resilient culture within the OPS. Second, redesign and long-standing structures and systems that exist within the OPS to ensure they are more equitable and inclusive of all the members by leveraging the OPSP, the CEC, key community stakeholders, and all members. Number 3, task the new Respect, Values and Inclusion Directorate to track incidents of discrimination and bias within the OPS that are not currently accounted for through our formal complaint systems. A system to identify, track, and report on these incidents should be developed or comprehensively heightened in partnership with the OPSP, CEC, and other key stakeholders, with results being reported to the OPSP through regular updates on the EDI action plan. And finally, number 4, The OPS racial profiling policy should be reviewed to ensure that it is current and reflective of leading practices. The policy should also be evaluated to ensure the systems and supports are in place, or in the alternative strengthened, for members and supervisors to identify, report, and intervene in a timely and constructive manner with incidents of concern. That ends my reading, and I sincerely thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you very much, Member Nerman. And I think it's really important to acknowledge your passion for this issue and the importance of you playing a role to represent the board on the committee. And certainly I look forward to hearing back your reports and the activities that the board takes. So with that, are there any other, is there any other business that any member would like to raise? Not hearing any, then I would like to have a consideration of a motion to move in camera that the Ottawa Police Services Board adjourn the public portion of its meeting to move in camera to discuss confidential items pertaining to legal and personnel matters in accordance with Section 35(4)(b) of the Police Services Act. And those in-camera items include legal services status reports, and settlements first quarter, and I believe a personnel matter. So with that, I'd move for adjournment.
I favor that.
Thank you. The next regular meeting will be Monday, June 22nd, 2020 at 4 p.m. And so with that, we'll bring the meeting to an end. Thank everybody for participating.
Thank you.